Welcome everybody to the Sleeper Wire All-Decade Team. It's me, Rob Rose, your host, and with me today I have Jason. Jason, say hello.
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 We are doing... Oh, geez, Miss Doubtfire came. Robin Williams, miss you, man. Good comic. Sure. Yeah. Today we're doing running backs, guys. And it's just me and Jason. George is off in the mountains eating burgers with peanut butter and bananas.
And bacon.
So, Jason, we went over the quarterbacks last week, man, and we had some fun with that. We had some Twitterversy. We had some people jump into that chat. Thank you, everybody. You jumped in, chimed in. Love to hear what everybody thinks. Remember, guys, we're doing this all for entertainment. If you don't agree with us, please feel free to let us know. We will do our best to try and engage you politely. This is some pretty wild statistics, man. When we started talking about this earlier tonight, we found one person that was above and beyond. Like, both of our lists did not look like this until we really started talking about it. But Christian McCaffrey is, like, what? The Soul Reaver? Like...
Well, so why don't we do this? Why don't we talk about what we're doing? So what we're doing on this show is we're filling out the best all-decade fantasy football team. So last week we picked quarterbacks. From 4, we had Tom Brady at 4, Cam Newton at 3, Aaron Rodgers at 2, and Drew Brees at 1. So what we're doing is we're filling out a super flex roster. So we've got our starters, which were Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers, and then we have our backups, which were Tom Brady and Cam Newton. This week we're going to give about 5 running backs. We might even get into 6, just because that's probably how many running backs I'd have on my roster on a standard superflex, and just give our top 6 of this decade. So, like Rob was talking about, when we looked at our list, man, go ahead, like, without a doubt, the best guy on the list, even though it's been a short NFL career, has been Christian McCaffrey.
It's ridiculous, man, and thank you very much for covering all of that. I got so excited that I just tried to jump right into talking about Christian McCaffrey this past season. This is historic, man. So depending on what site you use, we looked at a few and we came up with, I believe 471 is the number.
471 is his points this season.
PPR. So to put that in perspective, we could not find other people who had 400-point seasons or anywhere above 420. Nobody even got close. That's 50 points. That's ridiculous. Like, how does that I'm still kind of blown away by it. And the guys behind him, we kind of tried to pick by who had the most 300-plus point seasons. And that really kind of helped us whittle some people down. So, Jason, who was our number 2 on the list?
Well, so our number 2 on the list is Todd Gurley. He's had 2 300-point seasons, and then that's 2 additional 200-point seasons and 1 at 198. Todd Gurley is our number 2, but doesn't even sniff 400. The reason he's our number 2 is he has 383 and 372 back to back. You guys know Todd Gurley. 19 total touchdowns in 2017, 21 total touchdowns in 2018. He was a goal line machine. He was a screen machine. He totally got the job done. Now, the one reason I want to go back to McCaffrey, because we're talking about an all-decade team, and he's only been there for 3 years, but 2 out of the 3 years, Christian McCaffrey has had better seasons than Todd Gurley's best season. So we're talking about a number 1 guy who's had 2 out of his 3 seasons better than the best season of our number 2 guy. And that's why, to me, like, Christian McCaffrey's far and away ahead of the competition here.
And we should definitely go ahead and say that we are doing this strictly in PPR format. I'm sure that in standard leagues, people would have a lot of, would be ho-haying us right now. But this is a PPR Superflex roster that we're filling out. And I've never had somebody, like, I thought it was pretty cool that Lamar Jackson had the most fantasy points as a quarterback this decade with 419. That was this season. To put that in perspective, Christian McCaffrey scored, we figured this out earlier, 53 more points. Or
53 more points than the best quarterback scorer in the past decade. Just insane. So we're going back to talk about Christian McCaffrey, but Todd Gurley. So here's what I loved about Todd Gurley, and so we're trying to fill out a roster, but I also want to talk about some of the things and I know you do too, like some of the things that made him special for us. So Todd Gurley, this is what I loved about Todd Gurley. He came out in 2015 and he had a 208 point season, and he had 10 touchdowns. Everybody was on the Todd Gurley train in 2015. And in 2016, it seemed like everybody thought he was going to take that next step. But if you remember, he had Jeff Fisher as a head coach who really stifled his productivity. So he only had 885 yards. And like everybody was down on him coming out of 2016. So that's why I really loved him, because coming into 2017, he was a second rounder, right? So in 2017, if you got him in the second round, you won your fantasy league because he came out with 383 points. Can you imagine hitting on a first round pick and then having your second round pick be a Todd Gurley? And I think Todd Gurley being in the second round is one of the reasons why a lot of people go running back, because they really want to hit first running back and then find that diamond in the rough second running back. This year it's like Derrick Henry, right? So, but that's one of the reasons why I love Todd Gurley. On top of him winning me a ton of championships in 2017, he has the stats to back it up.
He does, and even this year, which was by all means a very down year for Todd Gurley, still scored 219.5 points, and that's 15 games, 12 started. So he didn't play all the way through. He's still a solid running back, but this year the workload wasn't the same. They really tried to ease him in the beginning of the year. But we see he's still dangerous. He did a lot of that damage late in the season. If we had Christian McCaffrey in a vacuum, like he did not exist to this list, there would have been so many more names that could have came into this, but he's just so far and above everybody else that it kind of sets a new standard for how we had to look at what we were doing. And that being said, I believe number 3 we came in with, who did we come in with number 3?
Zeke.
There we go. So number 3 we came in with Ezekiel Elliott, and he has been kind of something that's happened towards the end of the decade. But with running backs, one of the things that we couldn't factor in as much with quarterbacks was longevity. Jason, how much do you take a running back's age into your draft decisions, especially in the first and second rounds?
Well, so especially when they get close to that magic age of 30, it's hard to pick them, right? Like, especially early. If you looked at who was going at the top of the first round this year, it was Todd Gurley, who's 25, Ezekiel Elliott, who's 24, Christian McCaffrey, who's 23. So it didn't get to, like, Lev Bell is an old man at 27. David Johnson, I think, is at 27. So those guys were going towards the back half of the first round. But, you know, it's a young man's game. If you look at the top players, they're just all young. So, you know, the thing I really wanted to mention here, it's not that older guys haven't had great seasons or good seasons, but you see that they these running backs only have 3, 4, maybe 5 total really good seasons, and then they just have some okay seasons. So, yeah, it's a young man's game for sure.
Absolutely. And I think one of the guys we took early last year or this year was Saquon Barkley, who's also
yeah. Sorry,
22.
How did I forget Saquon?
Yeah, right. But bringing up Saquon, like he's a guy that's not on our list. He came pretty late in the decade, but he's put up some good years, so I expect him to be one of those guys that we see coming up in the next decade. If you guys are listening us in 2030, we'll be doing that all-decade team with grayer beards. No.
I mean, listen, I've got bad health. I'll be, hoping for stem cells or something. I don't know,
dude. Yeah, in the year 2030, like medicine will literally just be like mailed to you, and then you just like slide it into that slot that's in your arm now that like you put all serums, and then that little metal door closes and like
they'll just keep my brain alive.
Can your brain talk?
I hope so. It just screams silently to itself. That's probably not a good thing. We've gotten way off track.
Well, so moving on to the next person, though. I mean, why not? I mean, shit. We're kicking it, just the two of us today. And thanks, guys, for listening. It's always a good time with you. So who's our number 4, Jason?
So our number 4, and it took a little bit of discussion, and by points, he might not be number 4 over a number 5 guy, but our number 4 is Arian Foster. Now, a lot of you young guys who just got into fantasy football are like, who? But in 2010, Arian Foster scored 392 fantasy points. A monster year. He also had 2 other years of 300 and had a 4th year at 273. Arian Foster, when healthy, was a monster running back. He was one of those running backs who caught the ball before it was like real popular in the NFL.
Yeah, he had 66 receptions that year, 604 yards. He had 18 total touchdowns. He rushed for 1,600 yards. Like, those are the kind of numbers that just put up dominating fantasy numbers. So he had 392 fantasy points to put he definitely earned his spot there, I think, with that year. But that's for those of us who are long in the tooth.
Well, and again, it was one of those guys that you didn't see coming.
No, I did not realize that he did so well on that 3-year stretch. That's one of the reasons I definitely think we had to have him on this list, is he had 3 straight years of 300-plus fantasy points. And unfortunately, you never got that 392 back, but he was consistent for those 3 years, and you can't hate on that. Now, number 5 was somebody who, when we started talking about this earlier this week and tonight, I did not think was going to reach this list. And statistically, he's actually a little better than the guy that we were just talking about, Arian Foster. But due to the fact that he absolutely pulled his pants down and took a dump on your fantasy rosters in 2018, has earned him a spot at the back of this train. And that's Le'Veon Bell. So one of the things that we've named as our criteria here is 300-plus point seasons. Lev Bell had more of those than the rest of our contestants, and at higher number. So in 2014, he had 370. In 2016, he had 317, and in 2017, he had 341.
So, like, the big issue here is exactly what you said. In 2018, and he didn't play in 2018, and it wasn't like you knew that going in. The problem with 2018 for most fantasy players is people took a shot on him, or they drafted early before he decided to hold out. And then every couple months there was talk about him coming back. So even during the season, people were trading for him because they thought, okay, Lev Bell's going to come back and play. And then he just sat out the entire 2018 season. And so it's hard to put him higher on the list when he took a whole season and hurt so many fantasy football players, and not due to injury, because injuries happen. So the other season I want to talk about here is actually really incredible is the fact that he served a 4-game suspension in 2016. So he only played 12 games that season, and you'd think it would be a down year, but when he came back, he provided 317 points over that span. So 26 points, fantasy points per game. Lev Bell won you championships that year because he dropped in drafts because you knew he wasn't going to be playing for those first 4 games. But when he came back, he was a monster. 75 receptions in a 12-game season.
Yeah, that's beast, actually. We didn't even talk about that. He only had 9 touchdowns that year. Although 9 touchdowns in 12 games is pretty nice. I think he would have had 12 if he would have played all 16. But we did the math, and he would have ended up with 422 points if he would have played all 16 games in 2016. That's one of the better years that we have talked about. So in that time, he put up amazing numbers, almost borderline on what Christian McCaffrey was doing this year. But
yeah,
even talking,
I dare say that Le'Veon Bell would be number 1 had he not been suspended, had he not taken 2018 off, had he not gone to the Jets.
If you would have played last year in that Steelers offense, with that offensive line and that scheme that was made for him with Big Ben, he could have absolutely put up a 400-plus point season. But I don't think with the weapons that they have there that they ever would have ended up getting him over 450. Just looking at what it took for Christian McCaffrey to get to that magic number of 471. Do you think Lev Bell would ever have gotten the touches to be able to do that?
So I believe he has had more rushing attempts. Le'Veon Bell's had a good bit more rushing attempts than Christian McCaffrey. So Christian McCaffrey's best rushing attempt season this last year was 287. And getting back to Le'Veon Bell, he had 321 in 15 games in 2017. He's had 290, 261. Like, they gave him the ball a lot, but where he does lack is the total amount of targets. He has gone over 100 in targets twice. Christian McCaffrey is averaging right around 120, 125. So he's averaging 20 plus more targets, and also like he's catching them at a much higher rate, and I think that's what's important. So 141 targets this year, which is one of the reasons why he had 471 points. But he had 116 receptions. The one thing that doesn't get talked, it probably gets talked about, but the one thing I don't want to overlook also with Christian McCaffrey is it's not just that he gets all the opportunities, but he's on the field all the time. So, I think he was part of 95% of his team snaps this year. And I don't think anybody comes close to that.
No, that he is the last true workhorse back.
So, and what's funny to me is when he came out, the knock on him was that he's small and he couldn't handle the workload. And Ron Rivera said, "Hold my beer."
Yeah, I got this, Holmes.
I got this here. So
is that irony?
Probably a little bit. I do kind of wonder, what this new coach from Baylor is going to do with him.
Well, he loves football. Matt Rule loves football.
Well, and, I would hope
likes, so. Likes joking with DJ Moore, who apparently DJ Moore, back in the day, Matt Rule tried to recruit him to Temple, and DJ Moore wouldn't even go. He went to the University of Maryland, and now Matt Rule is his head coach at the Carolina Panthers.
Well, it was the long recruit.
Well, it was, and he was joking with him about it, so it's not like, something that he's like, upset about, but funny coincidence, right?
Well, so our top five, do you want to recap?
Well, I was going to ask you if you wanted to throw that sixth person in there. Like, if we were going to have a sixth, because we want to go deep with our running back pool to fill out this Superflex roster, which I am all about. Who are we going with?
So this one's the struggle because there's some guys in here. There's roughly three guys here that meets this criteria, and I think you and I have the same six. But I'm looking at it, and if the 300 number is the criteria, Adrian Peterson's number 6, and this is where, if you and I were talking standard, Adrian Peterson's probably the number 1 guy on the list. Right. If not, it's pretty close, right? He's had so many 200-plus point seasons. He's had 2 300-point seasons. However, one of them was 2009 for our all-decade team. Just it doesn't cut it. So he's had one at 347, which was the year he ran for over 2,000 yards. The problem with Adrian Peterson and the reason why he's so low on the list is he just doesn't catch the ball. Yep. 43 receptions is his highest amount. 436 yards isn't bad, right? But that's not even a year where he had 300 points, 275. Part of this, too, is that some of those Minnesota teams really relied on him for all of their offense. So it's a lot of stacked boxes, and he dominated against stacked boxes. So Adrian Peterson, for me, would fill out our roster. He'd be 6 of 6, and man, he'd be an amazing flex play.
Oh yeah,
but I do want to go back and see where he compares to his competition those years, right? Because that's part of it too. Like he's probably the number 1 or number 2 running back, even in PPR formats, a couple of these years. But when we're comparing season to season for this all-decade team, he doesn't stack up against the guys ahead of him.
Yeah, and I was really expecting a little more from some of the older guys because the league was a little more run-heavy earlier in the decade. But they just didn't score as many total PPR points. Guys weren't catching the ball as much. And like you said, Arian Foster really kind of made that movement, and Christian McCaffrey's kind of excel at it in a way that nobody thought was going to be possible at this point. Good Lord. But another guy that was kind of in the mix was LeSean McCoy, and he also caught some passes and was pretty good as a receiver as well. He never really got doesn't look like he ever got above 600 yards, but he got close a couple times, averaged somewhere around 400.
I may have to go back and look at after this is all done, because I've gone ahead and made up my mind. But looking at LeSean McCoy again, 328, 297, 330, 299. He's on the cusp. 328, sorry. So like 2 300s, a 297, and a 299.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't horseshoes or hand grenades, but I'm willing to call that almost good enough.
That's almost good enough, and that's why he's out. But like, again, these are going to be things that we want to discuss with you. We're going to put up a poll. We're going to put up our top 5. We're going to let you guys argue over 6, right? And I want to see arguments for LeSean McCoy because going back to Philly, he was Philly's offense.
It was beautiful to watch.
In 2011, he had 20 touchdowns. He made your fantasy season. He never really sniffed. He had 14 in 2016 with Buffalo. He had a couple years of high touchdowns, but can you imagine he put up 330 fantasy points with only 11 total touchdowns. And I say only, but that's because he had 1,600 yards on the ground and 539 yards in the air and 64 receptions.
Well, Well, and one of the issues, one of the knocks that you can use against LaShawn McCoy is that he didn't play full seasons all of these years. He did only play 12 games twice in 2012 and in 2015. He played in 13 games this year.
Yeah, so over the decade though, like you're right. He only had full seasons 3 out of the 10 years. He had a lot of 15s, but again, like, 15, 15, 12, 16, 16, 12, like not having him on the field really does kind of hurt, even if he puts up a lot of points when he's on the field.
Yeah, and that's something that we have to take into consideration when you're trying to put together a team of the most badass players of last decade to fill out a Superflex roster.
But here's the best part about it, though, Rob. Like if McCoy couldn't go, so let's say he's only playing 12 games, we still got Zeke, Todd Gurley, Christian McCaffrey. We can just plug right in there.
Plug right in. Good God, man. Can you imagine sitting there and thinking to yourself, like, no, it's cool. I'm not going to play Derrick Henry. No, I'm sorry. I've got Arian Foster on the bench.
Oh man. So we've got one more guy, right? That we would like to argue over. Not making this list, not making the conversation, somebody like Jamal Charles, who had a four season stretch that was pretty dang good, but he didn't make the list. The other guy we want to talk about is Beast Mode. And not for this season. Like, I know he's back in the playoffs. He's got one game. He's got one touchdown. Beast Mode's back, right? But Marshawn Lynch, he fired up the Seahawks, and he fired you up on fantasy football. He's only got one 300-point season. He's got 275, 269. So he makes the list, though, because every time you turned around, it was just he was a fun guy to watch. And I think, so on top of like the competitive nature in me, part of the reason why I love fantasy football is because it really made me love the NFL and not just like my team. Because for the longest time before I played fantasy football, it was Buccaneers or nothing. And unfortunately for me, the Buccaneers have been terrible for a long time. So when it was Buccaneers or nothing, I'd be done on Sunday and super upset. What fantasy football did for me is made me care about, I'll be watching a Browns Bengals Thursday night game just because I want to see how some of the players are doing. And Marshawn Lynch was that guy for me. I had him early in one of my early leagues, and watching him run over people excited me about not just fantasy football, but football. So that's why even though some of his numbers aren't good, like, he's on this list for me.
No, absolutely. And I got to squeeze one guy in there that kind of does it for me like that, and it's Mark Ingram, who never quite made the scratch as far as the 300 club, but he's near and dear to my heart. He's making this Raven team absolutely formidable, and he's played all through this decade. So he is he's made some top 10s that I've seen on of journalists, people talking about just regular best of the decade in regular football, but it's great to see him on the Ravens, and he has the same birthday that I do. So Mark Ingram, you're awesome. Yeah.
Homer pick.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like
absolutely.
me picking.
Now, it's not like I can say that like he deserves a spot on the list of the top 6 that we have of this decade, but he just deserves an honorable mention because he's a good guy. Big trust.
And he loves him some Lamar Jackson.
God, I wish somebody loved me like Mark Ingram loves Lamar Jackson, bro.
Yeah, I wish my wife looked at me like Mark Ingram looks at Lamar Jackson.
Good Lord. Yep. Yeah.
So that rounds out our list, man. Do you want to go over our top 6?
All right. So Christian McCaffrey, Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, Arian Foster, Le'Veon Bell, and the number 6 that we are putting out there is your choice, guys. We're going to leave that poll on Twitter. But right now, my money's on Adrian Peterson. Jason?
Looking back at it, man, it's
you going
it's
to LaShawn
so
McCoy?
Close.
You going
it's so
Shady?
close between Peterson. I'm going Shady McCoy. I'm going
right,
Shady,
man.
especially because we have such good talent that we can, even if McCoy doesn't play a game or two, we can fill it in. So I'm going to take Shady here.
All right. You know what? You swayed me. I think I like him as my 6. So Christian McCaffrey, Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, Arian Foster, Le'Veon Bell, and LaShawn McCoy. Those are our 6. Let us know if you think that somebody like Adrian Peterson or Marshawn Lynch should be on that list ahead of those guys, or tell us if you think somebody else deserves to be in there. But Jason, tell us where we can find you on Twitter, buddy.
Yeah, so I'm at FL Dr. Milbarge on Twitter, and I'm at BFTG Dr. Mill on Sleeper.
And I am at Esorbor1 on Twitter, ESORBOR1. It's my name backwards because I am Rob Rose. Thank you guys for continuing on this journey with us. We've had a lot of fun talking about this so far. Next week we will be doing wide receivers, so stay tuned and let us know what you think. We always want to hear from you. Check us out on Twitter at Sleeper Wire Show. And we will have more content soon, including episodes of Dynasty Wire and player shorts to help you get ready for next year's draft. This year's season may be over for you. Next year's is just beginning. So for Rob and Jason and George in the mountains, we will see you next week.